Walk 17, how y'all feeling tonight? All right, no. Listen. I feel like y'all can do better than that. Let me ask again. I said, walk 17, how y'all feeling tonight? Come on. Yeah, it's amazing. Man, I'm excited tonight. Real quick, before we get started, I just need to get a feel for like who's in the room. I gotta know who I'm hanging with, who I'm talking to for the next couple of sessions. So I heard that there's a couple of people from Buckhead Church in the building. Is that true? Okay, Buckhead. Okay. All right, now the next group, I heard you're few, but you're mighty. Decatur City, are you in the building? Okay, Decatur, I see you. Okay. Decatur, where it's greater. Cool. There's a group of people who hang out with one of my best friends in the world. You hang out in a little county. It's a really small county called Gwinnett County. Is Gwinnett Church in it? Okay, Gwinnett. Okay. All right, so I think that's it. I'm not missing anyone, am I? Oh, yeah. Y'all go by Woodstock, but I like to call y'all Hoodstock. It's Hoodstock in the building. Okay, cool. So y'all are a good group. Y'all are ready to go. All right, so we know which campuses are in the building, but I just need to know like who's really representing. So real quick, where my fellas at in the room tonight? Where my fellas? Listen, fellas, I don't understand this about you. Like anytime we ask for fellas to make some noise, you do one of two things. You either don't say anything because you're too cool, or your voice just gets real deep. You're like, yeah, I'm here. Steroids. I don't know what your deal is. I don't know why you do it. Right? Where my ladies at in the room? Ladies! Uh-oh. Now, ladies, ladies are always ready to go, right? Like, y'all just look for a reason to scream out, ah! Ah! You'll see your friend who you see, like, every day, and you're like, the next day, oh, my gosh! You'll wake up in your condo tomorrow morning like, I haven't seen you in forever! I slept next to you on an air mattress. What are you talking about? Man. Y'all, this is going to be a good time. This is going to be a real good time. All right, so now that I know a little bit about who's in the room, I haven't got a chance to hang out with a ton of y'all, so I feel like y'all need to know a little bit about me. So three things right off the bat that you need to know about me, super important. First thing you need to know about me, you probably guessed it by how light-skinned I am, but both of my parents are African, right? Now listen. When I say African, I don't mean like African American. I mean like straight up like Lion King, Madagascar, like African, right? Like my dad's name is Oluwafemi, my mom's name's Ekwa. Somehow the two came together, had a kid by the name of Gerald. What? It's like the whitest name for the blackest person. How that happened, don't know. Glad about it though, right? Because they could have named me something real weird, like, I don't know, Mufasa. Then I would have came out and been like, Simba. I'm glad they didn't do that. So yeah, my name's Gerald. Second thing y'all need to know about me is about 3 weeks ago, a little over 3 weeks ago, I got married to the woman of my dreams. This is her. Right. Shouted fine, right. Some of y'all are thinking, how in the world did you pull that off? Let me just tell you, this is why we tell you to pray at Inside Out all the time, because when you pray, you end up with that as your wife. I mean, come on, right? Like, woo! She's so embarrassed. She's in the back right now. She's like, I hate you. I'm going to kill you when we get back to our room. But I love her. And so, yeah, there she is. Come on. Hey. It's the worst moment of her entire life. So that's my wife right there. And then third and final thing y'all need to know about me is I'm like the slowest person getting ready ever. Like it takes me forever to get dressed, right? Like even for tonight, I was like rolling through in my head like the different outfits that I could wear tonight, right? And I was thinking about like this one particular shirt and I was like, I can't wear that. Like I'd be super preppy and it'd be super lame, right? But then I was like, oh, well, I could wear these jeans. And I'd be like, no, I'd be way too thug if I wore those jeans and nobody would listen to me. And so I landed on this outfit right here. I like to call this the sophisticated thug look. And And basically what that means is that I'm sophisticated enough to be a pastor, but thug enough to let you know that I'm still from the hood, right? Like, I'm just saying, I didn't choose the thug life chose me, so we're here, and this is my life, right? But because I'm one of those people, that takes a really long time getting ready, I spend a lot of time in front of one of these, right? Like, I spend a lot of time, like, checking myself out. And as I was getting ready for the night, there was one particular word that came to my mind when I was looking at my outfit, and it's this word right here. It's fly, right? Like if Delta and Southwest had a baby, it would be me. That's how fly I am, right? Like, I just felt like I was super fly. And that's what came to my mind, like, while I was looking in the mirror. Now, here's what I know about a room this size, is that a lot of you spend a lot of time looking in one of these to get ready for the walk too, right? Like, fellas in the room, you're trying to act like you weren't, but you were, right? Like, you were in your room just like busting out push-ups. And then you get in the mirror and you're like, ugh, yeah. Then you go hit some sit-ups, you're like, 12-pack, right? And you're in the mirror, swole up, practicing your pickup lines for the walk like, yeah, my name's Justin, but my friends call me Will. Like God's will for your life. Come on, bruh. We know that's not gonna work, right? Right, but you spent some time in the mirror and you try to get swole. And so the word that you might have thought when you looked at yourself in the mirror, you were like, I'm swole, right? Like, I'm swole. Ladies, though, you spent some time in front of one of these too, right? You spent some time getting ready, right? Listen, I know you did, because you were in your mirror with your one piece on like, You like, You were walking around your bedroom like, I am killing this one piece, right? Like, come on, I know you spent some time in front of one of these things, right? And ladies, while you were looking in the mirror, this is the word that came to mind for you. You like, yo, I'm bad, right? Now, small group leaders, let me just clarify, small group leaders. Bad means good. It's a weird thing. Ask your students in small group, they'll clarify for you, right? But you spent some time in front of one of these mirrors. And some words came to mind for you when you were looking in the mirror. Now here's the thing that I think is really interesting about mirrors. Is that, like, while we can look at them and they point out like some of the amazing qualities that we have, mirrors have a way of pointing out the worst things about us, right? Like, have you ever woken up in the morning and you wipe the like coal out of your eyes or whatever, and you look in the mirror and you're like, oh my gosh. There is a planet on my forehead. Is that Saturn? Like, what? Ah! Your mom's like, what happened? Like, nothing, Mom, I have a zit, it's fine, I'm just not going to school for a month, right? And you look in the mirror and it brings out the worst. Like for me, if I was just to be complete, can I be real with y'all for a second? Like for me, no matter how fly my outfit is, no matter how good I look, when I look in the mirror, a lot of times, that's what I see. And too black is what it says. And that might sound funny, that might sound stupid, but that's my reality. And I remember in 8th grade looking up on Google if there was a way to make myself more light-skinned because I hated the way that I looked. And maybe you can't relate to that, but I'd be willing to bet when you look in the mirror, there's some things that you see that you don't like as well. Like maybe what you see is fat. Maybe you see too skinny. Maybe you see ugly. Right? And you look at yourself and you go, man, there's some things about me that I wish I could change. There's some things about me that I don't really love. And the thing that's even more crazy about mirrors is that they were created to help you see yourself physically, but they also tell you things about your personality as well, right? And there's some things that you look in the mirror and you go, like, man, like, I am just such a nerd. Or I'm weird. I don't really fit in. Or maybe people look at me and I just feel dumb. Well, I don't know what you think when you look in the mirror. I don't know what emotion comes to your mind. I don't know what you feel. I don't know if it's negative. I don't know if it's positive. But here's what I know is true about you, because it's true for each and every one of us in the room. It's this, is that you have a view of you. Isn't that true? Like when you look in the mirror, you see something and you think something about yourself. You have a view of you. You have a perspective of yourself. You have an opinion of the person that you are. And students, I just want to tell you tonight that your view of you is a really, really big deal. Like what you see when you look in this mirror is a huge, huge deal. And here's why: because your view of you affects everything you do. The way you see yourself, the way you view yourself, your opinion of yourself will determine the person that you become. It'll determine the life that you live. If you see yourself as dumb, you're probably not going to get great grades. If you see yourself as weird, you're probably going to have a hard time fitting in. If you see yourself as an outcast, you're probably going to live your life in isolation. You see, your view of you affects every single thing that you do. And so I think it's a really important thing that we start to ask ourselves this question, and I don't think it's going to come up on the screen, but the question that I want you to ask yourself is this: is who or what is shaping your view? Well, like, who is shaping your view of you? I think it's an important question to ask yourself, because if it's true that your view of you will determine everything that you do, then it matters who's telling you who you are. Be willing to bet if you spend a little bit of time thinking about that question, you'd realize that the people who are shaping your perspective of yourself, the people who are shaping your view of you, fall into one of two categories. They're either far or they're close. They're either far from you or they're close to you. You see, there's people who are looking at you from a distance, and it's like they're watching you with a pair of these, not in like a creeper way, but like they're looking at you and deciding what your personality is. They're deciding what category you fit in. They're looking at you and they're going, you're a jock. They're looking at you, they're going, you're a nerd. They're looking at you, they're going, you're a band kid. They're looking at you, they're going, she's mean. They're looking at you and they're going, he's lame. They're looking at you and they're deciding the type of person that you are. And you would think that people who are far away from you, who speak into your personality, who speak into your view of you, wouldn't make that big of a difference. But the reality is that they do, because the more people that put you in a box, the more people that put you in a category, the more people who have a view of you, the more it affects you. And the more you start to believe it's true. See, there's people who are far away, who are looking at you, and they're affecting your view of you, but it's also true that there's people who are close to you. These are your best friends, your parents, your teachers, maybe your small group leaders, maybe your small group. And it's like they're looking at you with a magnifying glass, and they see you up close and personal. And they have a view of you as well. And the things that they tell you about you through this starts to affect the way you see yourself in this. You see, there are other people who speak into your view of you, and I think it's important for us to figure out who they are and what we're allowing them to say about us, because how you view you will determine everything that you do. See, students, here's the reality, is that you have a view of you. When you look in the mirror, you see yourself in a certain way. Others have a view of you. There are people who are either far or close, who are deciding the type of person that you are, and they're speaking into your identity and the person that you're going to become. But what I want to talk about tonight, the thing that I think is most important for you guys to understand on night one of the Walk 17 is this, is that God has a view of you. That when God looks at you, he sees something. Then when God looks at you, he has an opinion. When God looks at you, he has a perspective. God has a view of you. And if someone's going to shape your view, well, don't you think he should have a say? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But tonight, my goal is to just show you a little bit about how God views you. And my hope is that maybe you would start to see yourself the way that he sees you. Now, in order to talk about God's view of you, I want to start tonight by talking about a guy that most of you have heard of before. He's pretty famous in the Bible, pretty famous in the Christian world. It's this guy right here. It's this guy named David. And over the course of the next few days, we're going to spend some time talking about David's life, but more specifically, we're going to spend some time talking about David's heart. Some characteristics about David's heart that made David who he was. You see, David was a great king. David was a mighty warrior, but David had this relationship with God that was unique. And his relationship with God started when he started to understand the way that God viewed him. And so tonight we're going to take a look at David's life and at a particular part of David's heart that I think we can all learn from. Now, to tell you about David, though, I first need to go back and tell you about a few people who are significant in David's story. You see, David's story in the Bible is found in the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. And the reason that it's found in the book is because Samuel is in the background of David's story all along the way. You see, Samuel was a prophet. Samuel was one of God's chosen people to share God's news, to share the things that God wanted to say to his people. And so Samuel was the mouthpiece of God for the Israelites. Samuel was essentially their leader. The problem, though, with this was that the Israelites decided that they wanted to have a different kind of leader. The Israelites decided that they wanted to have a king, and that prophets leading them wasn't good enough because every other nation around them had a king. And so they decided that they wanted a king to lead them. So they have a conversation with Samuel, and God sends along a prospect for a king. It's this guy right here. His name's Saul. And so Samuel and Saul meet, and eventually Samuel ends up appointing Saul to be the king of the Israelites. The Israelites are super excited about it. They finally have a king. They feel legitimate as a nation. The problem, though, with Saul is that God had given him some really specific instructions, some really specific things that he wanted Saul to do, and Saul didn't follow through on the things that God had asked him to do. He was disobedient. And so as a result, God decided that, hey, you cannot be king anymore. And so God tells Samuel to go tell Saul that he is no longer going to be king, but instead he's going to find a new king in the town of Bethlehem. And this new king is going to be a kid. He's going to be a son of this guy by the name of Jesse. Now guess who was the son of Jesse? David. And so now Samuel has told Saul that he's no longer going to be king, and he's going to meet up with Jesse to tell him which one of his sons is going to be king. And this is where Samuel and David meet for the very first time. That's where we're going to pick up in the story tonight. That's how it goes. Samuel did what the Lord said. He arrived at Bethlehem, and the elders of the town trembled when they met him. They asked, "Do you come in peace?" The reason that they asked this isn't because Samuel was some kind of a bad guy, but it was uncommon for a prophet to come to Bethlehem, and so they were nervous. Did they do something wrong? Like, was God angry with them? Was he frustrated with them? And so they were nervous, like, what did we do? Like, are you mad? What happened? And Samuel goes, no, everything's good. Yes, I've come in peace. I've come to sacrifice to the Lord. That word sacrifice may be uncommon to you, it may be weird to you, but basically the way that it worked was that for the Jewish people, for the Israelites in the Old Testament, the way that they maintained their relationship with God was that they would sacrifice to stay in good standing with God. And this particular sacrifice wasn't just any sacrifice. This sacrifice would be followed by a feast. It'd be followed by a huge meal, by a party, essentially. And so Samuel was sent to go and invite Jesse and his sons to this feast, to the sacrifice, to this party. And so Samuel tells the elders, he says, consecrate yourself and come to the sacrifice with me. And then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice as well. And so they're all on the way to this huge party, to this huge feast, Jesse and his sons. And this is the moment where Samuel is about to point out who the next king is going to be. Here's what happens next. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab, who was one of Jesse's sons, and he thought, surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord. Samuel's going, all right, this is the guy. Like, we're here, we're at the party, that's the guy. He is going to be the king. And here's the reason that he thought that. The reason that he thought Eliab was going to be the king is because Eliab had similar features to Saul. And he was looking at Eliab from a distance with his binoculars, and he's going, you look like you could be a king. You're tall, you're handsome, you're strong. You look like the kind of person that would be a king. And as Samuel's looking at Eliab with these binoculars, and as he's deciding what his view of Eliab was, God intersects, and he has a conversation was Samuel. And here's what God says to Samuel. It says, but the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. Now, when he says rejected him, it's not like I hate him. It's not that he doesn't love him. He's going, no, this isn't the guy. This isn't the king. He said, I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things that people look at. People look at the outward appearance. But the Lord looks at the heart. God says to Samuel, he says, hey, listen. I don't see the way you see. My view isn't like your view. My view is different than yours. You know what I think is interesting about us? Is that as much as we hate to be judged, we judge people from the outside in, but God views people from the inside out. We judge people from the outside in. We're looking at them going, all right, this is your personality type. This is the way that you dress. This is the way that you act. I don't like you because of it. This is your reputation. These are the decisions that you've made. Everyone knows that you are this. Everyone knows that you are that. I don't like you because of it. And that's how we judge and decide who's good with us and who's not. But God is looking at Samuel and he's going, hey, listen. When I judge, I don't judge from the outside in. I judge, I view, I make my decisions. I find my opinions from the inside out. I'm looking at the heart. I'm looking at what's going on in here because God knows that what's going on in here determines everything that you do on the outside. He goes, I'm looking at the inside. And so Samuel, well, he continues to look for who might be the next king. The story continues. It said, then Jesse called Abinadab. I bet y'all didn't know that the Migos were Christians, right? Because this is where they got the song, Look at My Dab from. They were like, hey, Jesse called Abinadab. Look at my dab. Right, like that's where it came from. But Jesse called Abinadab and had him pass in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, the Lord has not chosen this one either. He said, no, that's not him. Well, then Jesse then had Shammah pass by. And Samuel said, nor has the Lord chosen this one. Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. But Samuel said to him, the Lord has not chosen these. So he asked Jesse, are these all the sons you have? Is this everyone? Samuel's going, it's not any of these 7 guys. But God told me for sure that the king was going to come from your family. It was going to be one of your sons. And if it's not one of these 7 guys, then who is it? And so Jesse replies, he goes, they're still the youngest. He is tending to the sheep, and he was talking about David. Are you freaking kidding me? They are at a party, probably the most important party that they've ever been invited to in their entire life, and they literally forgot to invite David. He wasn't even significant enough to be in the room. You see, I think this conversation gives us insight to the way that Jesse and his family would have viewed their youngest son, David, that he was worthless, he was insignificant, that he was too young, that he was forgettable. They didn't even think to invite him to the party. But that conversation not only shows us what their view of David would have been, but I think it might give us insight into the way that David might have been thinking about himself. Now, I just want to be super clear. We don't know for sure what David was thinking about himself in this moment, but imagine if your parents and your family had been invited to a party and you got forgotten and you didn't get invited. I bet you'd feel like this. You'd probably feel unloved. You probably would feel unworthy. You'd probably feel useless. And so while I don't know for sure that that's how David felt, I would imagine that David's in the field frustrated because all of his family is partying and he got left out. And this is the view that David might have had of himself. But regardless of how his family viewed David and regardless of how David viewed himself, Samuel didn't care about any of that. He says, someone's missing, and God told me one of these guys is going to be the king. And so he sends for him. This is what happens next. So Samuel said, send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives. So he sent for him and had him brought in. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome feature. Then the Lord said, rise and anoint him. This is the one. The one that was forgotten, that's the king. The one who your view of wasn't very high, that's the king. The one who was probably standing in the shepherd's field doing a servant's job, that's the guy who I want to be the king. But what happens next is absolutely crazy. You see, but when David arrived, he said to Samuel, I cannot be king. I'm the youngest and the servant to the family. Pick one of my brothers. And so Samuel left and he went to another town. And that's the end of the story. David ends up not being king because of his view of himself and because of his family's view of him. He just says, I'm not good enough. It can't be me. See, because everyone else's view of him started to affect the way that he saw himself. And so he gave up. And so he bowed out. That's a pretty sucky way to end a story, right? Like, to go through all of this and for David to not be king is pretty sucky, isn't it? Well, good news is that's actually not how the story ends. I completely made that verse up. That's nowhere to be found in the Bible. That's not what David says at all. Actually, here's what happens next. It says, so Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. And Samuel went to Ramah, and David is anointed as king. Gotcha. Yeah, listen. This is an awesome way for the story to end. The dude who nobody thought could ever be anything in life ends up being anointed as king. But y'all, it so easily could have gone the other way. Well, I don't know about you, but if I was in that situation and I was the one who was out in the field and I was the one that was forgotten and I was the one doing the servant's job and I was the one who was seen as the insignificant shepherd, I would have thought there is no possible way God would ever use me to be a king. There's no possible way. But you know why that didn't happen for David? You know why David didn't reject his anointing? You know why David said yes to becoming the next king? Here's why. It's because David had an open heart. David had an open heart. David had a heart that was willing to set his own view of himself aside, a heart that was willing to set the views that other people had of him aside, a heart that was willing to say, okay, God, what do you want from me? Who do you want me to be? What's the plan that you have for me? Because God, I'm open to however you want to use me, to whatever you want to do in me, to however you want to shape me. You see, David had an open heart, and it changed everything, because in that moment, David's identity changed. He went from a lowly shepherd. He went from an insignificant son to a chosen king of a nation that we have been talking about for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. You see, here's the thing that's so incredible about David is that his view was shaped by his maker, not the mirror. David's view was shaped by his maker, not this mirror. It didn't matter what other people said about him. It didn't matter that he wasn't invited to the party. It didn't matter that nobody cared. It didn't matter that he was doing a servant's job. It didn't matter that he was a nerd. It didn't matter that he was in band. It didn't matter that he thought he was ugly. None of that mattered. Listen, students. This is so important. David was willing to let God shape his identity and speak into his heart. He was willing to let his maker shape his view, not what he thought of himself, not what others thought of him. Listen, could you imagine what your life would look like if you did that? Could you imagine what God might be able to do in and through you if you started to live that way? Can you imagine how God might change you this week if you started to live that way? What if you were willing to say, okay, from now on, I don't care what people say about me. I don't even care how I look at myself. If God has something that he wants to say about who I am, then I want to be open to it. I want to be defined by my maker and not by this mirror. What if you started to live that way, y'all? I think everything would change. You know why? Because your view of you affects everything you do. And if you could see you the way that God sees you, then you would be able to do things that God has called you to do. It would change your entire life. It would change the person that you are, and you might be able to let go of some of the things that you need to let go of, and you may be able to step into some of the things that God is wanting you to step into if you would just be willing to be open and say, okay, God, what do you want from me? What do you see in me? How do you view me? What would it look like if every student here tonight just decided, you know what, I'm going to be open. And you had an open heart to God. And you had a heart like David. And you allowed God to speak into your identity. What if you stopped seeing yourself as ugly and you started seeing yourself as fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God? Well, what if you stopped seeing yourself as weird and you started seeing yourself as uniquely made and made on purpose for a purpose that nobody else in this world could accomplish? Well, what if you stopped seeing yourself as dumb, and what if you started seeing yourself as God's handiwork? What if you stopped seeing yourself through the lens of this mirror and started seeing yourself through the eyes of your Maker? Everything changed. But it starts here with an open heart. A heart that's willing to let God speak into it. A heart that's willing to let God speak what is true about you. And so for those of you who came to the walk for the very first time, I want you to know we're glad you're here. For those of you who aren't sure what you believe about this whole God thing, I get that. I just want you to know that God loves you and he's for you, and that when he sees you, he sees something different than you see in yourself and anything that your friends see in you. For those of you who've been doing this church thing for a really long time and you're into a routine, I just want to tell you that maybe God brought you here this week because he wants to break your routine and he wants to open your eyes and your heart to something so much bigger than you could ever imagine. Students, I'm just telling you, if you would be willing to do this, if you would be willing to open up your heart, God will do something incredible in you this week, and you will not be the same. So for those of you who are on board, here's what I want you to do. Every morning this week, I want you to pray this simple prayer. God, I open my heart. Would you open my eyes? God, I open my heart. Would you open my eyes to see me the way that you see me and see the plans that you have for me? Can I pray for y'all? Father, thanks so much for these students. God, thanks for the example that David is to us, that he just decided to say, okay, God, I'm open. I know what people think about me. I may even have views of myself, but if you see me in a way that I don't see myself, I want to be open to that. God, thanks for that example. I pray that the students in this room would follow that lead and that they would be willing to say, okay, God, here's my heart. I'm open. Would you speak into my heart and show me what you see in me that I can't see? God, I pray that they would have the courage for their view to be shaped by their Maker and no longer by a mirror. God, we open our hearts. Will you open our eyes? In Jesus' name, amen.